Hello, and welcome to the Magic of Calvin and Hobbes, a fan celebration. My name is Ryan, and I am a self-proclaimed Calvin and Hobbes superfan and expert.
And my name is also Ryan, although most people call me Indy.
So we're continuing our celebration of Calvin and Hobbes, this episode talking about the masked man of might, Stupendous Man. Now, of course, briefly, before we talk about him specifically, we need to acknowledge that we don't have the rights to Calvin and Hobbes. We're not affiliated with Bill Watterson or his syndicate, so we can't actually display any of the comics that we're going to be discussing, but you can find them on gocomics.com if you have a subscription, or you can find them in the books. So we'll have a blog post linked to this episode with all the dates of publication and all the books and page numbers where you can find each strip that we discuss. Okay, so before we get into anything else, we didn't get an email, but we do have a suggestion from my wife. So in the episode about Calvin's mom, we talked about how Calvin has multiple barbers, right? There's Pete and Charlie, and
Right.
possibly another unnamed barber, because there's one time where Calvin says, "This is the finest haircut I've ever received." You know, never criticize a guy with a razor.
That's true. I don't think he's identified as Pete or Charlie. So,
Yeah, so it could be either of them or someone else. But my wife said, I suspect Calvin has multiple barbers because he probably gets invited to not return a lot. So, I think I would buy that.
yeah, I could believe that. Although, given the never criticize a guy with a razor thing, that could suggest he's relatively good at the barber, at least. But
That's
also,
true.
that
Yeah.
is pretty believable, especially if you think of like his trips to the doctor and how poorly those usually go. So
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised the doctor hasn't invited him to not return. He
that's
almost recants the Hippocratic Oath. So,
that's right. He did consider doing that, it seems like.
yeah,
Is that the one where he says, I had to fend him off with his own tongue depressor?
I, I think it might be. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just imagine like practically sword fighting using the tongue depressor.
On guard. Yeah. So, hey, thank
God,
you, Carrie. That's a good insight. I think you might be onto something there.
that's true. And maybe Calvin requests new barbers too. It's like, what?
It could go both ways.
You didn't actually shave into my head. I may have a bad haircut, but you're downright ugly. Well, I want someone new then.
Yeah, I'm going to Pete now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about Stupendous Man. But actually, before we hit him specifically, let's acknowledge a couple of other superheroes in Calvin and Hobbes. So there are some heroes and villains of Calvin's comic books, like Captain Napalm, or Napalm, if you prefer to say it that way, or
Mm.
Amazon Babe. And Calvin does, in fact, pretend to be Captain Napalm one time. But outside of acknowledging that, we won't really deal with those heroes in this episode, and we'll leave that for a future episode on comic books.
Real
Now,
quick though, besides Captain Napalm and Amazon Babe, what superhero organization are they members of, or at least Captain Napalm is?
yeah, he definitely is a member of the Thermonuclear League of Liberty,
That's
and
right.
there are at least a few other members.
Right, because Calvin talks about being able to memorize like the secret superhero origin of all of its members.
Right, exactly. So we don't know how many members there are, whether Amazon Babe is one of them or anything like that, but there's several anyway. And Calvin is not dumb, he just has a command of thoroughly useless information.
I mean, that could come in handy. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, if you're ever on Jeopardy, that you could win a lot of money with that.
That's true. Or
Yeah,
if the schools would start asking about things like that and dinosaurs like they should, then yeah, Calvin would be a straight A student most likely.
that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Now, there are a few instances where quote unquote real superheroes, and by that I mean superheroes from media outside of Calvin and Hobbes, are mentioned or at least alluded to in Calvin and Hobbes. So, can you think of any references to quote unquote real superheroes in Calvin and Hobbes?
Yes, I can. And in fact, so I believe there's only one that's mentioned by name.
I think
I
you're
would
right.
say I would say there's a second one that is, clearly referenced, even though not mentioned by name. And then there's another time where it kind of looks like one was mentioned, but I think that's not the case. It's just a use of a term that sounds like the name.
Okay.
So yes, I believe that's right. So if you want more specifics, though, I will say Batman is the one that's actually mentioned on more than one occasion, actually.
Hmm.
And Superman is alluded to, but not mentioned by name. So we get references to kryptonite and up, and away, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then I'll ask you then, can you guess the other one where sort of a comic character is mentioned, but not really?
Hmm. I mean, there's one where he says, "This is a job for," and then he gets all tripped up, and Hobbs says, "For," and he says, "Someone else." But I don't know if that's really alluding to anyone. I mean, that could be kind of alluding to Superman, but
Yeah, that's Superman, I would still say.
yeah. So someone, so neither Batman nor Superman. There's one other allusion to someone.
Yeah, and I'll give you a hint. This, I mean, again, it's not really, but this person's name is mentioned, but it's not actually to be the character. It's actually a villain, not a hero.
A villain. Okay. No, I'm coming up blank on that one.
Okay, so again, this is a little bit, like I said, it's not really. So in, I believe the arc when Calvin's going to try to fix the faucet by himself, he
Hmm.
says the Hobbs like, and you can keep your remarks to yourself, Doctor Doom.
Ah, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Got
but
it.
I don't think it's supposed to actually be, Victor Von Doom from Marvel Comics. It's just Doctor Doom, like, you're doom and gloom, you're a naysayer, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's how I always took that one, but you're right. That could be taken as a reference to Marvel Comics. So yeah,
Yeah, I don't think
nice
it was
one.
meant to be, but like I said, technically the name is there, but it's not used as a name. So
Yeah. And just while we're at it, you said there are or more than one reference to Batman. I can think of two. So there's the one where they go to the museum and he tells mom that she should buy him stuff from the gift shop because it's all educational and you want me to learn, right? And then he scores big on that and he's like, wow, I wonder if we could get any Batman junk this way.
yes,
And then the other one I can think of is they're talking about Calvin and Hobbes are talking about why superheroes are so unrealistic, and Hobbes says something like, "Yeah, he could write letters to the editor and stuff," and then he goes, "Quick to the bat facts." That
exactly.
that's the other one. Okay,
Yeah, I would say there's one more too, but we can that actually relates to one of the Stupendous Man strips, so we can talk about that in a minute.
okay, all right. We'll come back to that then.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've established that, let's talk about the masked man of Megamite, Stupendous Man. Who is he? So, as we've said before, he's one of Calvin's alter egos, but in a bit of a different way than Spaceman Spiff or Tracer Bullet, because neither of them is Calvin in disguise. They're just kind of separate fantasies. But
Right.
Stupendous Man is to Calvin as Superman is to Clark Kent.
Yeah, explicitly. So Calvin speaks in these terms. He even says like, "Oh, my alter ego, Calvin," or my secret identity. So you're right. Yeah. So this is a different type of fantasy. He's almost the most real of the fantasy characters.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, he's got the costume that we'll talk about in a minute that everyone can see, at least kind of.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. So, of course, this alter ego business may lead some to wonder why the mysterious masked man has never been photographed with handsome 6-year-old millionaire playboy Calvin, but really we can only speculate.
Right. And that's again another Batman reference. So I think Bruce
That's true.
Wayne, at least by now, a billionaire, not just a millionaire. But yeah, so they talk about, billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne, and then, the mass vigilante Batman. So yeah, this I would count as another allusion to Batman in this way.
Although you could maybe argue also sort of an allusion to Iron Man.
Yeah, you could do that too.
Yeah. But yeah, Batman's probably the closer one. Now, Stupendous Man's powers include, but are not necessarily limited to, strength, or as he terms it, muscles of magnitude, the ability to fly, ultrasonic hearing, stupendous vision, and importantly, a stomach of steel. He has a couple of foes. So, can you just tell us Stupendous Man's foes, Indy?
Okay, so the ones I can think of are the evil mom lady,
Mm-hmm.
the arch fiend annoying girl,
Mm-hmm.
and then I kind of forget the appellation here, but then there's babysitter girl.
Yeah.
So I think those are the only ones that are named. Interestingly, all women. So
Yeah. There's
Stupendous
actually
Man.
one more who's named. So Miss Wormwood is the catalyst for it. Do you remember her villain name?
Okay, is it something about crabs?
Yeah, the crab teacher.
Okay, the crab teacher. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Stupendous Man seems to have a lot of conflict with maternal or feminine figures, which is maybe a coincidence, but it's sort of interesting too.
Yeah, I do find it interesting that Mo isn't ever one of the villains. I guess maybe that would just end up with Stupendous Man getting so crushed that it wouldn't be a good story.
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that too. Like, does Calvin ever think, oh, well, Stupendous Man could handle Mo, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it's sort of the. So in Calvin's mind, Stupendous Man is real, but maybe in a part of his mind too, he knows how things would be likely to go if Stupendous Man fought Mo. So I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe there's a bit of psychological self deception or self preservation or something going on there.
Yeah, and he does have Hobbs to help with Mo, so,
Yeah, which that was a gambit too. It worked out, fortunately.
yeah. Well, and Calvin never even realized it was a gambit. He was just like, yeah, yeah, Hobbs, you scared him off, but could
Yeah,
have gone very differently.
it could have. Yeah, so I'm thankful that that went well. But yeah, Stupendous Man might have been pushing it there. I don't know.
Yeah,
Actually, as we talked about, Spaceman Spiff did seem to fight Mo at one point.
that's
We don't
true.
actually see this, but we get a hint that this is coming. And like we talked about, we don't know how that battle went. So he
Yeah.
was reaching for his death ray blaster while Mo wasn't looking, but we don't know what happened after that.
Yeah, which in reality was a rock, so
Yeah,
that could have gone any number of ways. But now, Stupendous Man, in addition to having foes, also has some vulnerabilities. So, Mom Lady has a mind scrambling eyeball ray that coerces Stupendous Man into doing her nefarious bidding, for instance.
right. And I love it. It doesn't just coerce him. He says, I'm suddenly filled with a desire to do her nefarious building.
Yes,
But he goes like, oh no, she's changed what I want to do now. No, now my desires are not my own anymore.
which is actually, now that you say that, reminiscent of another strip where he says to her when she's trying to get him up for school, for your information, I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. And then you see him out by the bus stop saying, she sure can make a person want to do something. So,
Exactly. So yeah, that's I wonder I don't remember which of those came first, but it would be funny if one were like the inspiration for the other.
yeah. Yeah, like if that one inspired the Psycho Beam or the eyeball ray. I said
Yeah,
Psycho Beam because Babysitter Girl has a Psycho Beam that has a similar effect. It weakens his stupendous will, but he is able to resist that one.
that's true. So he has to risk, he has to get away to like avoid the effects of it, but he does show the stupendous willpower to resist. So well
Exactly.
done, stupendous man, I think we should say.
Yes, absolutely agreed. And the crab teacher is strong enough to drag him away temporarily, but he does break free of her clutches. So neither babysitter girl nor the crab teacher, I think, has quite the same effect on Stupendous Man as Mom Lady, as we will discuss some more later.
Yeah, that psycho beam is no joke.
Yeah. Now, in summary, then, Stupendous Man is a costumed superhero who swoops in to save the day whenever the tyranny of homework or bedtime or the girl down the street threaten Calvin. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about that costume for a second. So, I think there are a couple of interesting things about it. We've mentioned this before, but in the very first Stupendous Man strip, which ran on October 30th, 1987, and that's almost 2 years into the strip's run, Stupendous Man doesn't actually have the costume that we're all used to. We see Calvin's spiky hair. We see that he's wearing a Calvin Ball esque mask and some sort of cape. But even in the fantasy version of the strip, Stupendous Man here is wearing Calvin's red striped shirt and his shorts and his shoes and everything. So we see Stupendous Man running across the rooftops wearing this striped shirt and then a mask and a cape. And I just find that interesting. And also in reality, in this case, Calvin isn't wearing even the mask or the cape. So he's just imagining those parts. He's just
Right.
in his normal street clothes.
But he's actually on the playground, right? Because
Right.
I think we talked about this one, and this I just think this is so funny. It's like he prepares to swoop down from the rooftop, and then it says Stupendous Man did not realize just how high up he was. However, the winds could be a little tricky. It's like
Yeah.
going through all this in his head, which I just think is hilarious, especially thinking about like all the things superheroes typically do. And it's like good lord, like all the stuff you would really have to take care of, or like Batman will dive off a building and then throw a grappling hook midair to swing or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I know they're superheroes, but like, come
Yeah.
on, right? There's so many factors here. So
Yep. Well, and I feel like this strip is consistent with the idea that this is kind of Stupendous Man's first foray. He hasn't quite worked, he doesn't have his full costume. He hasn't
mhm,
worked everything out about, oh, how do you navigate these winds when you're jumping off this building? Hang on, give me a second, you
yeah,
know?
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so I feel like this is kind of reminiscent of at least the first Spider-Man movie when Peter Parker first gets his powers and his first costume is almost like Spider-Man's pajamas more than a Spider-Man outfit.
Yeah,
That, here Calvin got his superpowers, which listeners, you may remember in episode 3 with Nevin Martell, we decided that he got his powers from that plate of toxic radioactive waste that would turn him into a mutant.
yeah. I mean,
And
he was told that would happen, so we shouldn't be too
yeah,
surprised.
well, and that strip was all the way back in December of 1985. So that predates the first Stupendous Man strip by quite a bit. So, he ate that waste first, then became Stupendous Man, but didn't really have the full outfit, and he's trying to navigate the wind. So it's like this buildup. It all makes sense. It's coming together.
It does. And the
Yeah.
costume also reminds me a little bit of Robin in two ways. So the mask is kind of like a Robin mask.
Yeah, true.
And then also, so I guess here's a trivia question. Do you know where Robin's costume came from originally?
Nope. No, oh wait, maybe. Okay, I'm not a comic book aficionado, but I remember from one of the movies, which may or may not count as canon, that he was in like a circus, so his
Mhm.
costume may have come from something to do with that.
Yeah, that's actually right. So that was in the movie, but it also is from the comic. So Dick Grayson was an acrobat in the circus with his parents, and so yeah. So if you wonder like why is he wearing this like red and green kind of thing, it's because that was actually basically his circus outfit, and then you stick a spirit mask on him. It's like, oh well, now he's Robin, the Boy Wonder. No one could possibly tell he's Dick Grayson, the
Yeah, you
acrobat.
gotta
So
love superhero disguises. Although I've been told that Clark Kent's disguise of putting on glasses is actually more effective than you might believe.
I've heard that too. So yeah, it's interesting how different people can look like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, but anyway, to bring it back to this, so you mentioned how we've got sort of Calvin street clothes with a mask and a cape superimposed over it. It's like, well, yeah, that like you said, it's sort of like Peter Parker in makeshift pajamas or whatever, or sort of like Robin here. Well, yeah, you had this outfit already. It sure looks like it could be a superhero outfit. Let's just go with that. So
Yeah. And so the next instance of Stupendous Man, we'll now see his costume, which comes almost exactly a year after this first instance in November of 1988, when he gets the costume that we're used to. So, Indy, would you like to tell us a little about that?
yeah, so we've talked before about how his mom makes the costume for him. And given some of the things we've just been talking about and how originally he didn't have a costume, at least when he first was pretending to be Stupendous Man, this kind of makes me think maybe this wasn't just a coincidence, right? So when we see this strip happen, Calvin's like, "Hey, look what mom made me, a superhero outfit."
Yeah,
But I'm starting to think maybe she heard him like pretending to be Stupendous Man and thought, oh, it'd be a nice thing to do for my son to make him this outfit. So I think that yeah, Stupendous Man came first. His mom heard him playing this and then made him the costume as a result of that.
I think that's a real reasonable theory. I like that. I could
Yeah.
totally see it.
Yeah.
So, and specifically, what she made for him was a red hood and a cape, or maybe they're crimson if we want to be more specific.
Specific shade of red. I think he
Y-
says vermilion in one
Yeah,
in a vermilion flesh, Stupendous Man is away or something like that.
yeah. By the way, so when I was a kid, because of Calvin and Hobbes, I had my own little superhero persona that I called Incredible Man because
Okay.
I couldn't be Stupendous Man, so,
Right.
but had to be something like that. And I had like a black cape and stuff, so I was all dressed in black for my superhero outfit. But so because of that, I came up with stuff like in an obsidian flash. So
Okay.
Calvin inspired me here. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we can get a lot of nice vocabulary words with Calvin and Hobbes and comics in general. So,
Yeah.
colors like this, crimson, vermilion, obsidian, and other things too. So
Like we've said before, this is an educational podcast.
definitely one
Yeah.
of the best educational podcasts, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Unbiased, just
Yeah,
telling it like it is. Yeah.
definitely. Completely neutral, objective opinion.
Yeah. But whatever color the costume is, it's very important to Stupendous Man that Mom Lady must not discover his secret identity, which is funny because, as we've talked about before, who was it that made this outfit for him? You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, she made the outfit for him, but I mean, that's we just forget about that. No, no, she can't discover my secret identity.
yep. So I also think it's interesting that when Calvin is wearing this costume, so in the first strip, when he doesn't have a costume, he's imagining sort of a makeshift costume. And then when he has this costume, to everyone else, even Hobbes, all it is a hood and a cape, and they still see his normal striped shirt and black shorts and tennis shoes. So I find it interesting that even Hobbes doesn't seem to see Stupendous Man the way that Calvin does, because if it's only Calvin slash Stupendous Man in frame, in addition to the hood and cape, he seems to be wearing something like a red spandex suit and yellow gloves and yellow boots and possibly some sort of utility belt. It's yellow. It could just be a regular belt, but
Mhm.
he's got a yellow belt on.
Which brings me to an interesting question that I thought of just looking at some of these strips. And I think I know the answer, but I want to see what you think. Do we ever see the full sort of imagined Stupendous Man costume in a color strip?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of Sunday strips, like the one we'll come to in a bit where he's liberating cookies. We see him blast off into the air, and it's a
Okay.
Sunday strip. And I think there's also one where maybe the first Sunday strip where he encounters Mom Lady for the first time. I think before he encounters Mom Lady, we see him flying across the cityscape, and we see him in his full outfit in color.
Okay, that's interesting because I know we definitely see the what most people see in color. So in an arc we'll talk about later, we definitely see color strips with him in just his normal clothes, but also the hood and the cape. Okay,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's interesting if we do get a color version of like the full outfit as Calvin imagines it.
yeah, I'm pretty sure we do because I mean I know that it's red and yellow,
Okay,
and so I'm getting that in. I got to be getting that image from somewhere.
all right.
Now I've got a trivia question for you. There is one case where someone besides Calvin is in frame, but we still see Stupendous Man's full outfit. Can you think of it?
Ooh, okay, let's see. Someone's actually in frame, but we see the full outfit.
Yeah.
Man, I'm not sure. I'm coming a blank on this one. What is it?
All right, so it's the one where he's battling Annoying Girl. He flies up into the sky with his giant snowball, and he uses his stupendous vision. So we see
Okay.
him up in the air holding this giant snowball, but then there's this kind of pop out circle with Susie in it in the same frame.
That's right. Okay.
So
Yeah, he uses his amazing, stupendous vision to focus in on her from up above. All right.
yeah, so she doesn't see him, which I think is why we can see him in his full costume, but she is in frame.
Okay. Yeah. No, well done. That was a good question.
Yeah, thanks. And interestingly, in that frame, Susie still looks like Susie here. She's not, Calvin's not imagining her in some costume. So it seems that Annoying Girl doesn't have a costume even to Calvin, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah, and now that you say it, I don't think that any of the villains he fights have costumes. They're just them. I mean, so he doesn't call them by their names. I mean, except, Mom Lady's kind of the name, but it's still different. But yeah, they don't have costumes. They're just villains through and through, I guess. Which is, yeah, what
Yeah.
you see is what you get. It's a villain, but yeah, they don't actually have costumes. They just have the super villainous identities.
Yeah, and I mean, you could take it as okay, we're seeing when they're in frame, we see Calvin just in the hood and cape and then his regular clothes. And so, we're seeing them as they're actually dressed because we're seeing everything as quote unquote reality.
Hmm.
But in this one case where he's seeing Annoying Girl, we're seeing him as he sees himself. So that would suggest that we should also be seeing Susie as he sees Susie, which means he's seeing her as just Susie, but calling her Annoying Girl.
Yeah, it's also interesting too, especially in that one, that I'm not quite sure what the crime or villainy was that Annoying Girl was engaged in. So she appears to be just walking down the sidewalk. It's like,
Yeah,
oh man, we better vanquish her quick.
yeah, her crime seems to be that she exists. So,
Yeah, it's walking while annoying or something.
yeah, so, something like
Yeah,
that.
whereas with the other villains, so the evil mom lady tries to institute a totalitarian system of rule. The evil babysitter girl will have a local household in an iron grip of terror, that kind of thing. I don't
Yeah,
know
and
if
the
the
crab
crab
teacher
teacher.
is, terrorizing all these children with a test.
Yeah, so that's pretty
But
bad. But yeah, it's unclear to me what annoying girl was actually guilty of.
yeah, I guess we may come up with a few things in a bit, but yeah, that one's hard to figure out. So, speaking of, let's go ahead and actually just look at the various Stupendous Man stories. And I think since there aren't that many of them, we can probably at least touch on all of them. So, with that in mind, for this sort of episode, as is tradition, how many Stupendous Man strips would you guess there are?
All right, so this is again, so we keep saying with these, it always feels like there's more than there really are. And so I initially had like a fairly high number in my head and I kept paring it down. So
Mhm.
I'm going to guess 22.
Okay, that's a good guess. And on one hand, I could argue you pared it down too much because by
Okay.
my count, there are 38 strips.
Oh,
But you could also argue that some of these are story arcs.
all right.
So
So we don't know whether to count that as like one or more than one then.
yeah, so it
Okay.
could it could be that 22 is closer to the number of Stupendous Man stories that there are.
Okay.
So I think you're pretty close there,
All right.
because some of these stories run over the course of more than a week even. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
But
think you're in the
again, it
right ballpark.
feels like more. So Stupendous Man feels like a very ubiquitous presence in the strip.
Yeah, agreed. Same with Spaceman Spiff. Like it's just so easy to think that there's more of it than there is because it's such a iconic, important part of Calvin's world.
Exactly.
So we already talked about the first instance of Stupendous Man with not having the costume, and the second instance where he first gets his costume. The third one is the very next day after he gets his costume, uh, and by that I mean the next day in papers. It might be the same day in the world of the strip because I
Yeah.
think it's kind of a short story arc. So he's wearing his costume at the dinner table. Mom tells him to take it off. And this is where he says he needs it because Stupendous Man has a stomach of steel.
Which, and again, I just have to laugh. This strongly suggests Calvin should be aware that the villainous mom lady knows his secret identity, since he pretty much up and tells her, right? Like he
Yeah.
calls her mom. He answers to Calvin. I mean, it's first like, I'm not Calvin. I'm Stupendous Man. But he's sitting at his place at the dinner table. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just keep getting a kick out of that. To me, that's very amusing.
Yeah, it's a fun one. And just the I need this because it has a stomach of steel. What a mean thing to say.
Yeah,
But
kind of on brand for Calvin, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right, so the next one is the first Stupendous Man Sunday strip. So it's the first time we see him in color, and I'm pretty confident we see his personal version of the costume in this strip.
Okay, that may
So
be
yeah, so the narration tells us that some diabolical fiend threatens to establish a totalitarian system of rule, which turns
See,
out to
I
be
knew
Mom
it.
Lady. Yeah, yeah, you knew. So she vanquishes him and sends him to bed, which is where he was supposed to be. And she does it by carrying him up the stairs like a football tucked under her arm, which I find hilarious. And at this point, he's wearing his red shirt when he confronts her. But then in the last panel, he appears to be in pajamas, but still wearing his hood. So, because mom tells him to take it off before he smothers in his sleep. I'm not sure how or why she got him in his pajamas and didn't get the hood off in the process, but that's a minor detail.
Yeah, I did notice that too. It's like, well, how did that work? But
Yeah.
yeah, but no, I also think it's funny. He says this would have been plenty humiliating without the goodnight kiss.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I think too, up until this point, I think I assumed that the hood and the cape were all one piece or connected somehow, but it turns out it's two separate pieces. There's a hood and a cape that can go on individually.
Yeah, we'll see that again in another strip, but yeah, I had the same impression that until I noticed that, I thought that it was just a hood with a cape attached to it.
Yeah.
The next one is another Sunday strip, and in this one, in the throwaway panels, Calvin is looking out his bedroom window, and then in the second of the two throwaway panels, in his mind, it's a jail cell window that he's looking out of. Then it goes into the main strip, and he says that mild-mannered Calvin is stuck doing math problems on a beautiful Sunday. So he changes into Stupendous Man, who flies into the air, comes back down, and strikes the Earth at an acute angle, causing it to rotate backwards. That turns the day back to Saturday,
Which makes
which it makes sense. And I wonder, did Bill Watterson get that from Superman doing basically the exact same thing in his
yeah,
own way?
that's that seems caused a lot of, I don't want to say controversy, but like a lot of debate over the years. The one in Superman, I mean,
Right.
where not Superman that came out last year, but like the original Richard Donner Superman film. Especially for, I'll mention that especially for our younger listeners who may not be aware of the original Superman film. But yeah, so and that one, Superman flies around the Earth so fast that it reverses time. Now, I never thought that really made sense. I've heard some people say that he wasn't really turning the earth back. That was like a visual metaphor for him turning time back. Some, I don't know. I guess that makes a little more sense. But I just remember as a kid being like, well, wait, why would that make time go backwards? Just, even if you spun the earth backwards, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. Venus spins backwards, and I'm pretty sure time runs normally there, although I guess I've never been to Venus, so,
That's true. Maybe that would be an interesting thing to check.
yeah,
I'm not sure how we would check that, but it would be interesting.
right. And the other thing that bothers me about the Superman scene is, and I'm not the first person to come up with this, but the problem is that he has to fly from like New York to LA or the other way around or something in order to stop the missile and save Lois Lane, and he's just not fast enough to do both. But then he's able to fly around the world multiple times in under a second. So I
Yeah,
don't, that feels like a disconnect to me, but
it really does. I mean, maybe so this is the most charitable interpretation I could give that. So it's when Lois Lane dies, he's so overcome with rage that it unleashes his, full unbridled power and then he does or something. But that being said, I agree with you. That seems like a clear disconnect. I'm not saying that's a great explanation, but that would be the best one I could give to try to make that work.
yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. It's like an adrenaline thing or something.
Hmm.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, so Calvin does the same thing.
Sorry, he doesn't,
Yeah.
well, hmm. you know, I was going to say what Stupendous Man does may seem somewhat more plausible than what Superman does. I may actually stick with that. I think Stupendous Man literally just turning it back and then we're going to count it as Saturday. That makes more sense than saying Superman flew so fast that he literally reversed time or whatever. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is still, turning the earth backwards. How does that cause time to stop and reverse? But
Well, so here's
whatever.
what I'm thinking. So that doesn't technically reverse time. It just like resets what day it is. So you say, well, it became Sunday when the sun rose from the previous day, right? So we undo that. So now we've gone back. Now we're in the previous position of it being Saturday again.
Okay, yeah, I could buy that. There is the minor issue of getting the earth rotating in the correct direction again, but we won't worry about that.
Oh yeah, I guess I was just kind of assuming well, it just starts back up again, but
It's like spring loaded or something, and as soon as Calvin lets go, or as soon as Stupendous Man lets go, it returns to its normal.
yeah, like if you
Yeah.
ever as a kid, like you put a fan on the lowest setting and then you can kind of hold it, and then you let it go, and then it keeps going again. But yeah, don't
Yeah.
actually try that, listeners. That's probably a bad idea, especially depending on how fast the fan's actually going. But
Yeah, I would recommend against it.
or you might break your fan. Who knows?
Yeah, either
Either
way.
way, like not as bad as injuring yourself, but still not great.
Yeah. So mom asks Calvin if he's done his homework. He's walking by in his Stupendous Man outfit. Actually, he may not have his Stupendous Man outfit on. I'm not looking at the strip right at the moment.
I
But anyway,
think
he says to mom, it's Saturday, so he doesn't need to. And so I wonder, was it really Saturday the whole time? Because we don't see mom's response saying, no, it's not, or anything like that. So I gotta wonder.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a Sunday strip, so we could say that could be evidence to think that it actually is Sunday. On the other hand, we have story arcs that go multiple days, and so, or,
Yeah,
multiple days in the real world, but clearly are the same day in strip. So we can't necessarily assume whatever
yeah.
day a strip is released is the day it is in the comic. So, yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, well, and there are Sunday strips where Calvin gets home from school and Hobbs pounces on him. So, yeah,
And no
it's
wonder
whatever
you
day it needs to be,
do it on Sundays, even. That's not cool.
right? Yeah. But whatever the case, Calvin claims that it's Saturday now and he doesn't need to do his homework, and Stupendous Man has saved the day. Now,
Hey,
there's the next one is part of an arc where Calvin is supposed to be cleaning his room. Now, the whole arc doesn't involve Stupendous Man. It's just this one strip within the arc. But in that one strip, he comes back downstairs after having been sent upstairs to clean his room, and he's wearing his Stupendous Man outfit, and he has this triumphant grin on. And mom says, "Why aren't you cleaning your room?" And he says, "Ha! No four walls can hold the Stupendous Man." And this is the one where she fixes him with her mind-scrambling eyeball ray that causes him to go upstairs and do her nefarious bidding.
that's right. And I love how Calvin describes the effects of this. And I think that's a common, really charming feature of Stupendous Man's adventures. So, stupendous, or Calvin's stupendous narration. Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
you can say this is true of all of his alter egos. Like, I find it very amusing how Calvin narrates Spaceman Spiff and Tracer Bullet too. But sometimes I think I find the Stupendous Man ones the funniest.
yeah, I like I don't know if pompous is the right way to say it, but
I know what you
something like
mean,
that.
though.
Yeah, like a
Yeah, like
pompous tone.
very over the top, every description, and yeah, everything that happens. Not just you said no four walls can hold Stupendous Man. I think that he says you've been foiled again, evil mom lady. Ha ha ha.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then just it's always you mentioned some of these with muscles of magnitude or the
Hmm.
man of mega might or with stupendous powers of reasoning he deduces this. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun how he describes everything.
Yeah, I agree. And now we come to the first extended story arc that features Stupendous Man kind of as the driving force. And I love this one. This one's awesome. So once again, Calvin is stuck doing homework. It's tyranny. And so he
It
changes
is
into
tyranny.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he changes into Stupendous Man and flies to the Mount Palomar Observatory in California, where he unscrews the telescope lens, this like 200-inch telescope. And just as a side note, so I like the idea that in Calvin's mind you can just do that, that the lens is just, screwed on like the lid of a peanut butter jar or something.
Well, sure, what if you needed to change the lens? You'd want to be able to take it off and put a new one on.
That's a good point. Yeah, you got to change that lens every once in a while.
I'd be
But
surprised if telescopes didn't work that way.
well, let me tell you, I actually looked it up, and that telescope uses a mirror, not a lens.
Oh, I'm
So,
surprised.
yeah. So I'm a bit of an astronomy nerd, and I have my own telescope. It's not 200 inches; it's a 6-inch telescope, but it also has a mirror. So that's what made me think to even look this up. But so in telescopes like this, you've got the tube, and the mirror is actually at the back of the tube, so you can't just unscrew it from the outside. But it's a Stupendous Man story, so it doesn't matter. Here, it's a lens that you can unscrew. In fact, Bill Watterson has a quote relative to, I think it's the report on bats, where he says he loves writing for Calvin because he only has to know as much as a lazy 6-year-old. So I feel like this is an instance of that.
That could be. So, I mean, maybe he knows that's probably not how telescopes work, but like I said, maybe it's just, well, this is what Calvin thinks. Who cares whether it's right?
Yeah, this is how a 6-year-old thinks a telescope works, so that's all we got to go with. I mean, why wouldn't you unscrew the lens? You make a good point, Andy. What if you have to change the lens?
Yeah,
So,
you might we need one. That actually makes me think. I wonder if old like spy glasses or anything could have been made that way. Probably not. They're probably
yeah, maybe.
yeah, but
Yeah,
or maybe a toy Calvin had could have the lens screwed on somehow. But yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, moving on.
that would make sense. But anyway, he uses the lens to focus the sun's light onto Calvin's school and fries it clean off the map, which I think is a brilliant solution to not wanting to do homework.
That does seem to solve the problem.
Yeah, at least it does temporarily, but my favorite part is when he gets back to his room and mom is on her way in to check on him. So this is where he says, "Oh no, mom lady can't discover my secret identity." So he dashes into his closet to change, but his zipper gets stuck, which I'm not exactly sure how that works with his outfit just being a hood and a cape, but sure,
Yeah,
his zipper
I was
gets
wondering
stuck.
that.
Yeah. And whatever the case, I love it. And then mom opens the closet door to find Calvin standing in his underwear saying, "Geez, mom, can't a guy get a little privacy?" And when she's asking, "May I ask why you're standing in your closet in your underwear?" He says, "Oh, no reason. I was hot."
Yeah, and I also think this is funny kind of in retrospect because most of the time Calvin doesn't seem to care whether his mom or maybe other people see him naked even. Like she'll give him
Yeah.
a bath sometimes or he'll come down out of the bathtub naked. So then the fact that here is like, "Oh man, why can't I get some privacy?" It's like, when have you ever cared about this?
Yep. So yeah, inconsistent, but his mind is racing.
That's true. You
And
have to protect your secret identity.
yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, his plan didn't work anyway, and he still has to do his homework. So
Well, it's just because
tough
his
luck.
mom didn't believe him that Stupendous Man fried his elementary school off the map.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, if she had watched the news like he said, then she said, "Oh, I'm sure it'll be like in all the papers tonight or something like that." So
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Maybe she had to eat crow later.
probably, yeah, she probably apologized for scolding him.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I love that one. The next story is the one where Stupendous Man attacks Rosalind. Now, we talked about that in some detail in episode 13 about Rosalind, so we won't go into great detail here, but you can listen to that episode if you want more detailed information. But briefly, the short version is that Stupendous Man attacks Babysitter Girl, flies out the door in a vermilion flash, hides in his secret fortress, and then goes back to Calvin's room and changes back into Calvin, where he gets in bed. Rosalind
All
finds him,
without being
and
detected.
yeah, pretty impressive. And then finally, Rosalind finds him and makes him sign a confession. So,
Lies, all lies.
yeah, Rosalind made me write that. She hates kids. But if you want more on that, go to the Rosalind episode. And then after that, there's a Sunday strip where Susie shows up at Calvin's door. Now, here he answers as Stupendous Man and identifies her not as annoying girl, but as a fool mortal female.
Sounds.
And so we don't have Annoying Girl yet, but he explains that he needs to go liberate some cookies that are being held captive in the pantry, and he dashes off. And then back at Susie's house, her mom asks if Calvin's family had an egg they could borrow, and Susie says no one was home, which I wonder if that was maybe not just an excuse, but also a slight against Calvin. Yep, there's no one home there.
That's true. That would be a little on brand for Susie. I do wonder, though, what would have happened if she had told him what she was there for? Could this have been a mission for Stupendous Man?
Yeah, that would have been a good mission for him. Although, would he have accepted it for a girl? I don't know. We'll see that maybe something on
Yeah,
that in a minute.
yeah, that's an interesting question because I guess it could have gone either way, right? Like I could see this as oh, my civic duty to help the fellow person or something, or it could be, diabolical fiend. I won't help you with your schemes or something like that. So
Yeah, could have gone either way. But in the next story, we do meet Annoying Girl officially. And I love this story too. It starts with Calvin trying to throw a snowball at Susie, and the snowball travels about 4 inches before hitting the ground. And Calvin says, I thought Earth's gravity felt exceptionally strong today.
Yeah, and on a personal note, I think that exact line to myself fairly frequently. Like sometimes when gravity does seem to feel stronger than usual, but sometimes just if something doesn't quite go the way it's supposed to, it's like, well, I thought Earth's gravity felt especially strong today.
Yeah, and do you remember what other incident corroborates Calvin's theory that Earth's gravity is especially strong today?
Yeah, he spilled his oatmeal down the heater.
Yep.
That's right. So yeah, Hobbes says, "Oh, this explains how you spilled your oatmeal down here." Yeah, I mean that would make sense if Earth's gravity was especially strong.
Yeah, he dropped the oatmeal. Yep.
Yeah. Now I had another personal note. I had an experience kind of with a similar thing, somewhat literally with gravity. So I'd climbed a tree and I needed to get down, so I was going to jump out of the tree. And at this point, I thought, okay, here's what's going to happen. I will jump out of the tree, then I will fall, and then I would land on the ground. Now, before I tell the story, I asked you, does that sound like a reasonable supposition about what would occur?
That does seem to be how things usually work.
Okay, yeah, I certainly thought so. So I got ready to jump out of the tree, but here's what actually happened. I jumped out of the tree, and then suddenly I was just on the ground, on my back, in fact, without any step two of falling.
Hmm.
And I literally thought, like, what happened? Why didn't I fall? How did I go from just jumping out of the tree to being on the ground already? We skipped the part where gravity pulls me down. So yeah, I think I kind of thought of this strip even too. I'm like, I thought Earth's gravity felt especially strong. Something seems to have gone wrong here.
I mean, that sounds like more than gravity just being strong. That sounds like you fell in a wormhole or something.
Yeah, that's true. It's like, or a time skip of some sort. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and I know listeners, it probably sounds like I'm joking, but this is really what happened. Like, I'm telling you, I did not fall. I jumped and then I was immediately on the ground. So, yeah,
Weird.
something went wrong with gravity or time or something there. I'm still confused about it.
Yeah, that is very strange. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So yeah, so this sort of thing can happen, is what I'm saying. And unfortunately, I couldn't turn into Stupendous Man like Calvin could.
right. I've heard people describe snowboarding that way, that one moment you're snowboarding and then the next moment you're on your back and you're like, how did I get here? So you
Okay.
just did a more extreme version of that.
I'm even more cool than a snowboarder, it turned out.
Exactly. Yeah. So gravity is too strong, and I think this is the closest we can come to the crime that Susie is guilty of. That is not being hit by a snowball. So, um,
Yeah, I guess. So that's right. So Calvin tries to hit Susie with a snowball, but because maybe she was responsible for the unusual
oh,
gravity, maybe this
that's
was annoying girl's diabolical scheme.
that's got to be it. And so he's releasing the world from annoying girl's clutches with her gravity shenanigans.
Wow.
Okay,
Oh
it all
yeah,
makes
that
sense
makes
now.
perfect sense. Yeah, this wasn't unprovoked. He was trying to save the entire world from catastrophe.
Okay, all right. Then good job, Stupendous Man. Thank you for your
Yeah,
service.
thank God we have him around.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, he says, "This is a job for," and then he runs off, and we get a couple of beats of Hobbs just standing there. And then we see Hobbs in Calvin's room saying, "For," and Calvin says something about how mom must have put the cape in the wrong drawer, which this is an instance where he's already wearing the hood. So this confirms that the hood and cape are indeed separate.
Yeah, it's another instance of that.
Yeah. Now, in the next strip, Calvin is struggling to put on his snow pants, and Hobbs says, Superheroes wear snow pants? And Calvin
When
says,
there's
When there's
snow out,
snow
they
out, they
do,
do.
which is kind of an interesting question. Like, I don't necessarily think of that, but yeah, the superheroes have different outfits for different weather conditions or
Yeah, it makes
contingency
sense.
plans to deal with this. Yeah, it would make sense, but I guess at least I don't think about it so much.
So, do they wear board shorts when it's really hot?
So there is an instance, this wasn't because of the weather on purpose, but somehow in a Spider-Man comic, like he can't get to his suit when he needs it, or he loses it, or something. But he has to do something heroic, so he actually puts a paper bag over his head and goes out to fight crime.
All right. Well, so what I want to see, listeners, if we've got any artists out there, is like Spider-Man, but with board shorts and a tank top and flip-flops, and then you can do the bag on his head if you want.
There you go. That
Yeah.
that would be on brand. Now with Spider-Man, it's usually, again, not planned is because something
Yeah.
goes horribly wrong because Peter Parker has famously terrible luck.
Right.
But
That's true. Yeah.
which is funny for us, but yeah, not so great for him.
Yeah. But not only is he trying to get snow pants on, but he has yet another zipper malfunction. He says, "Of course, the zipper's going to get stuck if everyone stands around watching me."
Yeah, which true, when people stand around watching, that does seem to make more things go wrong. But it also occurs to me this might actually be just a general costume problem because this also happens to Calvin when he was supposed to be an onion.
True.
Yeah, he seems to
Yeah.
have a lot of issues with costume zippers.
Well, that actually tracks. I kind of see the same thing with my kids. So,
Were they
yeah.
onion?
We haven't done the onion costume. I don't
Okay.
know if I can. I certainly can't sew one. I don't think I could convince my wife to give that a shot, but if we ever do, I'll let you know.
Okay. I mean, maybe just for fun, that's hard to convince. If they were in a play about nutrition and the four
Yeah,
food
that's
groups,
true.
that might be an easier sell at that point.
Yeah, maybe I'll run that by their school. See if we can put
There you
that
go.
play on. Yeah.
Yeah. Next PTA meeting, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. But finally, Stupendous Man is able to go out and roll a giant bowling ball sized snowball and fly up into the sky, or in quote unquote reality, climb a tree and drop it on Annoying Girl. Now, how he got in the tree with such a huge snowball is a mystery, other than, Stupendous Man flew up in the air. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Even if you couldn't fly, you probably would need muscles of magnitude and mega might to do that.
yeah, snow is heavy.
Yeah,
But
plus, I mean, just having one of your hands occupied and you still have to get up in the tree.
yeah, and even flying, Stupendous Man, has to have his hand out like Superman does, so he can only have the snowball tucked under
Hmm.
one arm.
Does he
But
have to do that, or is that just
I don't know. He probably doesn't have to.
for?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I could fly, I probably would do that, but I don't know if it would be
Yeah, it
required.
looks cooler.
It
Yeah.
does look cool. Plus, then like maybe your hand deflects any bugs that might be flying by or
Oh,
something.
good point. It's functional. Yeah. So Susie tells her mom, who tells Calvin's mom, who lays down the law, and Hobbs suggests that maybe this is a job for Stupendous Man. And what's Calvin's response?
Actually, this doesn't sound like quite his type of job.
Yeah. So Stupendous Man is done with this battle. We're not going any further because Mom really laid into him on this one.
Yeah.
Although
Also,
I
like
think,
too, though. So we had discussed before. We weren't sure what crime Susie committed. Now we seem to know it's that annoying girl had changed the fundamental of gravity. But when his mother confronts Calvin about this, he says, "Oh well, that must have been Stupendous Man, champion of virtue and right. I'm sure Susie deserved whatever she got." So
yeah, that
if
probably didn't
Susie,
sell it very well.
I mean, it makes sense. Oh well, if Stupendous Man vanquished her, that must have been for a good reason.
Right. Which we've established now that it was. She was screwing up gravity somehow. So,
Yeah, Calvin
yeah,
should have explained that to his mother probably, but
yeah, that's the
it,
problem. He didn't
yeah,
go into enough detail.
yeah, it might not have worked anyway. Like I'm thinking of the snow goons. It's like, see,
Yeah.
it all makes sense. See, they never see.
Well, and of course, being the evil mom lady, she might have been in cahoots with Annoying Girl. So,
That's true. I don't think there's any evidence of this, but what if the evil mom lady, babysitter girl, and the archfiend annoying girl started their own like super villainous league?
that would be a dark day.
It
And
would
Stupendous
indeed.
Man would have his work cut out for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope the man of Mega Might would be up to the challenge.
I wonder if he could assemble the Thermonuclear League of Liberty or something to help him.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he wouldn't just because of the kind of person
He does
Calvin
seem to be kind of solitary.
Yeah, even though, as we talked about, so Hobbs is definitely aware of Stupendous Man, but there's never any hint that Hobbs is going to have his own identity or be a sidekick or anything.
Yeah, that doesn't really feel in character for Hobbs, so that would be
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, Hobbs
Now,
would probably be like, all right, I'll wait here. Let me know when you've, defeated the evildoers or whatever.
yeah, well, and also, what side, what alter ego would Hobbs have? He's already a tiger. You can't improve upon that. So
That's true. Although, so you can transform the tiger even to an even more ferocious tiger. Like I'm thinking Cringer turning into Battle Cat here.
that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, Hobbs might accept that.
Yeah, maybe. Although you're right, since there's no room for improvement with being a tiger in the first place, he might find the very idea insulting.
Yeah. Also, I just gotta say, the name Cringer. Who came up with that?
Hmm. I would guess Adam. Like maybe it started as a description of his
Oh yeah.
tiger, and
Okay.
then it's like, oh yeah, he's kind of a scaredy cat, no pun intended. So we're gonna keep calling him Cringer. I don't know. That's my best guess for that one.
By the way, for any of our listeners who may not know what we're talking about, this is He-Man. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, there is on a different topic a new He-Man movie that's going to come out later this year, I believe.
Yeah. I saw the
I
preview for it. I was a little disappointed, I'm gonna say.
yeah, I would say I have mixed feelings. Like I wouldn't say disappointed exactly, but I will say skeptical maybe. Like because when I
Yeah.
was a kid, He-Man was like my favorite
Oh,
show.
totally.
Yeah, I loved He-Man, so I'm like really hoping for this movie to be amazing. I don't know. I'm adopting a wait and see approach at this point, I guess.
I will say Skeletor looked pretty cool. I'm
Yeah.
not as sold on He-Man.
Yeah, I might have to see him more. The I will say the sword looks
Oh,
just
sure.
like it should. That's kind of amazing that they have, that because it's maybe not the most practical design, I wouldn't think. But anyway, they it was
But
very
it's gotta
cool.
look cool.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. It might be amazing. It might be a big disappointment. So I don't know. But
You know,
in any
I
case, the character's fun.
I think what really disappointed me about the preview was there was no "by the power of Grayskull" in the preview, and so I was just like, "Is this even He-Man?" So
Yeah,
maybe
maybe
they
they
can
were
save it.
saving that for the real thing.
Yeah. Anyway, we digress.
Oh yeah,
uh,
that's right. Stupendous Man.
yes, the real hero. So
Yeah.
the next installment is just a standalone daily that you could kind of see as a follow-up in some ways. Calvin runs up to Susie in his costume and says, "I'm Stupendous Man," and then he flies away and says, "Kapwing!" And that's where Susie notes that virtual reality has nothing on Calvin. So this to me suggests, coming back to earlier, would Calvin have gotten the egg for Susie as a mission if she'd asked or whatever? Calvin's feelings about girls notwithstanding, this could be some attempt on Calvin's or Stupendous Man's part to impress Susie.
Yeah, I think in this case she's just Susie and not annoying girl specifically. He doesn't seem to feel like he needs to vanquish her or anything. So
Right.
yeah, so maybe this is part of his civic duty to protect citizens somehow, or it could be right. Maybe he wants to impress her or just sort of include her in what he's doing, even though not a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thinking about it. This is jumping ahead slightly to something we'll talk about in more depth in a second, but Stupendous Man seems to assume that girls will have a hard time controlling themselves around him.
Right.
And
Well, I mean, obviously.
yeah, I mean, with good reason, of course,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's funny that Stupendous Man may not share Calvin's typical get rid of slimy girls view, at least as long as they're not engaging in supervillainy like mom lady, annoying girl, and babysitter girl, or maybe crab teacher.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of interesting there. So he seems to be somewhat ambivalent in that regard.
Yeah. So, and, we've talked before about how Watterson suspects that Calvin might have a little crush on Susie. So maybe it's coming out here a little bit. He can
Yeah,
he can do that as Stupendous Man.
That's true. As Stupendous Man, he can do a lot of things that regular Calvin couldn't.
Right.
Yeah. Now, one other thing I find interesting here about this strip in particular is kind of reminiscent of an earlier strip where Calvin's dad is just sitting reading, and then I think you hear from off screen, bang, and then Calvin dashes over, jumps up to protect him, and he goes, I think it might even be the same sound effect, like kapwing, and you see
Yeah.
the bullet bouncing off of him, and then he runs up, up, and away. And so this is kind of like a sort of version of that. Like he doesn't seem to be protecting Susie, but it's similar in that there's someone kind of minding their own business. Unbeknownst to them, a superhero needs to run up and then dash off again.
Right. Yeah, that is similar. And I guess that one could maybe be another reference to Superman or something. It's
Yeah,
uncertain. It's unclear if he's being Stupendous Man or Superman or some other hero in that one with his dad. But yeah, those are very similar.
yeah.
And now we come to my absolute favorite Stupendous Man story.
Probably a lot
It
of people's favorite.
It's so good. In this one, Stupendous Man comes to school, and this even provided the back cover for the book Homicidal Psycho Jungle Cat. So I think even Bill Watterson might say this is his favorite Stupendous Man story. At least it got his attention enough to make it the back cover of one of his books.
Oh yeah, that's a great cover. I mean, and this story, it probably is my favorite Stupendous Man story too.
It's so good. So they have a big history test, and Calvin has brought a secret paper bag, or rather, its contents are secret. The bag is there for all to see, but Susie asks what's in it, and what does Calvin tell her?
So I think there's like two stages to it. So first he says it's a severed head,
Uh-huh.
and then he says specifically the head is an oracle, and it's like Susie is a booger brain.
It speaks the truth.
Yeah, yeah. So supposedly, because he does tell her it's something that's going to help him with his test, or with
Yeah.
with the test. I remember that, but then he won't say what it actually is, and he said it's a
Well,
severed head that tells the truth and that sort of
yeah.
thing.
And before that, Susie says, "So what is it, a bomb?" And he's like, "Well, wouldn't you and the principal both like to know?" Which maybe it wouldn't fly so well today.
Yeah, I mean, back, I guess, I mean this unironically, it was kind of a more innocent time. We hadn't had,
Yeah, all the horrible stuff that's happened since then hadn't happened yet. So
yeah, so things like that could read as an actual just, ridiculous joke and not as
yeah, how
something.
preposterous would that be? Yeah,
Yeah, no one would ever do something like that. So,
yeah. So
but but yeah,
listeners, apologies if that's a sensitive topic for anyone.
right.
Obviously, we don't condone that sort of thing.
No, so and again, not to dwell on that. So, back to the fun
Yeah.
of a little boy's imagination.
Yes. So during the test, now Calvin asks if he can go out to his locker. Miss Wormwood says no, and he says, "You're spoiling a big surprise for the class." And she says it'd be a big surprise for me if you would just do your work. So Calvin tries a different tack. He asks if he can get a drink of water. She lets him do that, and out in the hall, we see him pull his hood out from the bag, and he says, "This is a job for," and that's where that strip ends.
What a
I,
great way to end that too. It's like a
I
teaser.
know.
Next
Yeah.
one.
So then, in order to avoid detection, he jumps into his locker where he changes into his costume and he sings a little theme song. And listeners, we're just going to give you a teaser because in our next episode, we will be talking about some of the songs and poems that come up in Calvin and Hobbes. So here, he sings a little theme song. He says, and this is how it goes in my head: Stupendous man, dum 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 dum. So, Indy, would you like to give us your rendition?
Sure. So I have two for this. So my kind of initial thought is that he says stupendous man, and then it goes bum da 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 bum da da da,
Okay.
kind of
Oh yeah.
Superman-esque like trumpet sort of thing. But then
Uh-huh.
I also thought, based on the rhythm, I don't know if he would do this. It could be like the Ride of the Valkyries, like Stupendous Man. Bum da da dum dum bum da da dum dum.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we've
Yeah.
got some good options there. So, listeners, does it sound like that in any of your heads? Do you have your own version?
And like Ryan said, in our next episode, we're going to have a lot of songs and poems. So we think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so tune in for that one. But after he sings that theme song, the principal pokes his head out of his office while Calvin from inside his locker is saying, "Gosh, it's dark in here. Where's that darn handle?" And
Yeah, it
then,
just occurs to me too. Like I hadn't really thought of this before, but earlier you mentioned he says, "Wouldn't you and the principal both like to know?" And then the
mhm,
principal does actually make an appearance, although he doesn't seem to ever. I'm sure he hears about it later, but he doesn't encounter Stupendous Man directly.
yeah, as far as we can tell, he just goes back in his office.
Yeah,
But
I imagine that he was informed about this at a later point, though.
I I would think so, yes. So at this point, Calvin can't get out of his locker. So at the next strip, it's going bang, bang, bang. This is a real job for Stupendous Man. Bang, bang, bang. Heck, this may even be a job for the custodian, which is one of my favorite lines in the entire arc, although not my favorite. We're coming to that.
Yeah, that is good though. I mean, and I don't know what your experience was, but I remember in elementary school, we loved our custodian. Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, he was a great guy. We would like to talk to him, and I mean, I'm sure he was great at fixing things or whatever. But I don't know. I just remember how much all of us kids really liked him. His name was Al the custodian.
Okay. I think ours was Joe.
Okay.
Yeah. So Miss Wormwood, aka the crab teacher, comes to investigate, and she opens the locker because Susie has said, well, maybe he went to his locker because he said he had something that was going to help with his test. So I think she opens it just expecting to, maybe see whatever Calvin might have been looking for. And out comes Stupendous Man. And this is when we get my favorite part. This is the Stupendous Man chant. Let us perform it. S for stupendous. T for tiger, ferocity of.
U for underwear, red. P for power, incredible.
E for excellent physique. N for um something. Well, I'll come back to that.
D for determination. U for, wait, how do you spell this? Is it I?
And I feel like that just gets better and better as you go along. I mean, going from stupendous to tiger, comma, ferocity of, I think is already funny.
Oh, yeah,
And
that is
then,
my favorite part for sure. Tiger
yeah,
ferocity of.
but then to take that to the extreme, to a similar thing, comma, thing, but now it's underwear, comma, red, just takes
Yeah,
it up a notch. And then the in for something. Like, I imagine Bill Watterson going, I can't think of anything for in. Oh, that's perfect.
yeah. Yeah, and actually, did you ever try to think of what N could be? Because I'll be honest, that is a hard one. I'm trying to
It's a
think.
tough one. Yeah, I
Maybe,
can't really. I've never come up with what that could be. I mean, I haven't tried super hard, but it's a tough one.
yeah. I think so. This literally just occurred to me now. Maybe nobility. I mean,
Okay. Yeah,
that's
that's a
not.
good one.
Yeah, I mean that would be okay. That's more of Stupendous Man's like moral fiber than his, I don't know, his might or whatever. But yeah, maybe. But no, I would agree. Like I had a hard time coming up with something for N also. So I don't see why Calvin. It makes sense to me that Calvin and maybe Bill Watterson too also had trouble with that.
Yeah. And then just throwing in that last bit of you for wait, how do you spell this? Just I don't know. That's just perfect. This 6-year-old trying to do this. It makes so much sense.
It does. And I also love how, like, clearly he had this great dramatic idea, but hadn't planned it out yet. So it's like, yeah, we start off really great. And then, wait, what? So
Hold on. Yeah. Uh, and so Miss Wormwood then is dragging Calvin off, lamenting that not only does she have to be a disciplinarian, she also has to be a psychologist. And
exactly.
while she's saying that, Calvin is saying something like, "Your nefarious scheme will never succeed," or something. So he escapes, runs into the classroom undetected by the crab teacher, and this is where he tells a couple of girls, "Try to restrain yourselves, girls. I'm just here to do Calvin's test."
Yes. And I think this is actually the only time that we ever see Calvin directly interact with any girl other than Susie.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Now Susie actually is one of the girls, at least in frame when he says this. But
Yeah.
there's another one too, and he says girls plural. So yeah, I don't think there's anywhere else in the whole strip where we see him doing anything like this, where he directly says something to any girl besides Susie.
And I think it's the only case fittingly that we get the name of any other girl. There, he mentions other kids in his class, Mo, obviously, and Ronald, and maybe you could argue Filthy Rich. But here, Calvin doesn't say the name of the girl, but this girl says to Susie, he lives on your block, doesn't he? And Susie says, I hardly even know him, Candace.
Right. Which I also think is interesting because, like, I get why she said that, but that is a fib. Like, not only does she know Calvin pretty well, I would argue at least some of the time she actually kind of likes Calvin.
Yeah, this is kind of a classic, I'm not with him sort of thing, I think.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's like, oh no, I've never met my boyfriend of 3 years ever in my life before. Like that
Yes,
guy
exactly.
embarrassing himself is someone completely different.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, because Susie, yeah, Calvin can be obnoxious, and sometimes she doesn't like him, but a lot of times she's intentionally going over to play with him or inviting him to do things. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So,
so
but
little bit
any
of posturing for Candace here, I think.
right. But whatever is happening here, Stupendous Man comes in and takes Calvin's test, and I love the answers he provides. We don't know what the questions are, but his answers range from 1492 to the Battle of Lexington to Trotsky to the cotton gin. So I want to know what was on this history test. But
Yeah, I'm a little bit impressed that Calvin would even be aware of some of those
yeah,
places
Trotsky in
before.
particular, I'm not sure I even know what that one is, but
Yeah,
uh,
I think that's a reference to like the Russian Revolution.
yeah, I
Um,
think so. So it's yeah.
but I don't think I would have had any idea about that when I was 6 years old. So
Nope. And then he dashes off, reminds the kids to brush their teeth, and Stupendous Man is off to save the next, whatever the next catastrophe is from happening.
yeah, which is great too, like the parting line, because that was, especially in the olden days, that was such a thing for superheroes. There'd be not necessarily in the main story, there'd be like some little thing at the end where the
Yep.
superhero tells the young reader the importance of some good habit or whatever. So I just love that he flies off telling them to always brush their teeth.
Yep. Well, it makes me think of this isn't exactly the same, but Power Rangers. Did you ever watch Power Rangers?
Just a little bit. So I think when it came out, I was just a little bit too old to really get into it. So like
Okay.
I was aware of it, maybe saw a couple episodes, but I didn't see much of it.
Yeah. So I was into it for the first couple years, and after each episode, they would do a basically don't do what you just saw in this show sort of PSA.
Yeah, like,
Uh,
well, we use weapons and fight people, but you should never do that.
yeah, pretty much. And Animaniacs did a spoof of that. And so they did their whole Power Rangers thing. And then at the end, it was like, remember, kids, fighting giant bugs isn't very cool. If anyone ever tells you to fight a giant bug, you just say, no way. Now that's cool.
That's
And
right. Well,
so,
remember too what Animaniacs did. You remember where they got their morals?
no.
Okay, it was they
Oh,
spun
oh,
the wheel of morality.
that's right. Yes.
Yeah, they go, wheel of morality, turn, turn, turn. Tell us the lesson that we should learn.
Yes. And then it was always some ridiculous lesson. Yes, that was great.
Yeah, which, as I understand it, the executives producing the show or at the network or whatever were saying, like, no, this is a kid's show. We have to have a moral. And the writers didn't want to do this. So that was their way of rebelling. Like, they technically would put in quote unquote morals, but it would be this complete spoof thing that,
Yeah.
would never have to do with anything.
I think that's also why they threw in their segments like useless facts and stuff. Yeah, okay, fine. We'll put in some educational content.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
That being said, there actually was educational content in Animaniacs.
Yeah, I learned that starfish have no brains. That's true.
Yeah. And then I couldn't do all of them, but we learned like every country of the world and every
Right.
United States in its capital. And they
I'll
would do
confess,
references to other things too.
I actually memorized the countries of the world song. I won't sing it for you here, listeners. I will spare you that, but that's the sort of dork I am.
I do not blame you. I can only remember like the first few usually. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
remember the tune, but yeah, that's cool that you memorize the whole thing. But yeah, listeners, if you want to hear this, you can look up Animaniacs, All the Countries of the World, Or also, you could look up Rob Paulson. He's the voice actor who did the voice of Yakko, who's the one that sings that song. He's also a lot of other voices that you'd probably recognize from that and other shows too.
Yeah, he's pretty prolific.
Yeah. One more thing about the morals too. So you mentioned Power Rangers. Going back to He-Man again, that was actually a thing with He-Man too back in the
Oh
day.
yeah.
So yeah, afterwards you get usually He-Man. It could be another character, but he'd say something about what happened. So this usually would tie into the episode. So it would be like, today we met so and so who wanted to have this money, or something like that. But what he found out was that this greed didn't make him happy, and so we know that it'd be that kind of thing. Actually, they
Yeah.
were pretty good morals from what I remember as a kid.
Yeah, I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then the other I remember again from back in the day. This would have been GI Joe, and that's where so anyone who grew up especially in the 80s or maybe even a little later, if you say something, you say, now we know, they're always going to respond, and knowing is half the battle. GI
Yep,
Joe.
that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, there
All
is
the
actually a long history of superheroes or other similar types of characters or things aimed at children giving explicit morals at the end. So yeah, I love that Stupendous Man continues this tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has given us some great pop culture references in this episode. So,
Oh,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it's
that,
which I don't know, maybe unsurprisingly, right? So a
yeah,
lot of
it's
these
fitting.
things I personally enjoyed growing up, and I know you have too. So
Yeah, yeah, very fitting. So after Calvin dashes off, Miss Wormwood eventually catches, he walks back into the classroom and says, "Here I am, Miss Wormwood. Boy, was I thirsty." And
and
then we see,
wiping his mouth of the water. So I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
clearly he
where else
was
could he have
just
been?
getting a long drink.
Yeah, he's got an alibi. So Miss Wormwood drags him away to the principal, and he's yelling, "No, no, it wasn't me, class. You stop, stupendous man. Tell her, help, help."
Yeah, which I really love that. That's another of my favorite parts of this arc because the whole like class, you saw Stupendous Man. It's like, if that's true, how would you possibly know this? Like,
Yeah, how do you know, Calvin? Yeah,
yeah, it's another instance of the, oh no, mom lady can't know my secret identity. It's like,
yeah.
oh, somehow I know the class saw Stupendous Man, even though that wasn't me, of course.
And I wasn't there. I was getting a drink.
Yeah, I was so thirsty. Tell them, class, what?
Yeah. So we don't actually see Calvin getting dragged off. This is all from Susie's perspective. She's just sitting there with different perplexed looks on her face and things, while off screen we hear Calvin saying all this and crash bonk and all that stuff. And so Susie is thinking to herself, when mom asks me how my day at school was, I always just say fine and change the subject, which I think is just a great way to end that you're getting her perspective. And then in the last strip of this whole arc, we see Calvin talking to Hobbs about what happened. And this is where Hobbs asks if Stupendous Man has ever won a battle. And we'll come back to that in a second. So just, put a pin in that.
Yeah.
There's one more Stupendous Man strip, but it's short. And in this one, Calvin says, we can't trust politicians or business leaders or etc. to help us. So as usual, the superhero business is up to me. And we see him putting his hood on. And that's the last one that I'm aware of.
So I have to say how much I absolutely love this one too, because you're right. Even though it's short, it's only one panel of actually Stupendous Man or Calvin putting it on. I just love the whole setup. It's like, oh, society is going to pot. We can't trust anybody. The hero business is up to me. And then this determined expression as he's putting the hood on. I love how dramatic it is and how serious Calvin is about this. And I don't know. I also this is just something I think of from time to time too. So just like I thought Earth's gravity felt especially strong today. This is something that runs through my head a lot too. It's like, oh well, clearly the hero business is up to me now. We're gonna have to do this. So
Yeah, just watch out for those wormholes when you're jumping off whatever you're jumping off of.
that's true. Yeah. So I have not jumped out of a tree since then.
Okay.
Um, but I don't know, maybe sometime I'll try that again. But yeah, for more
See what
context,
happens.
you might think when I said, "Oh, I jumped out of a tree," this was when I was a kid. No, this was just a few years ago, so I was definitely a grown adult when this happened. So I don't know,
Okay.
make of that as you will.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No judgment. Climb trees. It's fun.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah.
And one just thing real quick. So I think there's one more Stupendous Man strip that we haven't mentioned yet. And
Okay.
this is another short one. And then I think it starts with Calvin's dad in his office, and the phone rings, and he answers is like, "Hi, Dad.
Oh,
Oh, wait.
yeah.
Forget that I called you Dad." And it's like, "Oh." He's like, "Oh, Calvin, I'm busy. I can't." He's like, "Oh, well, wait. Do you have any crimes to report?" And
That's
then,
right.
yeah, so then you see him after this. His dad has to go, but he's sort of with the phone, wearing the hood and cape. He says, "Man, this secret identity stuff is hard to keep track of."
Yeah, that's right. I missed that one. Thank you for bringing that one up. We got to have that one in there.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
this might actually be the only kind of interaction between Stupendous Man and Calvin's dad, too. I don't think
Yeah,
there's
I
any
think
others.
so. Yeah, I think you're right. So I said a minute ago that Hobbes asked if Stupendous Man has ever won a battle, and Calvin's response is, well, they're all moral victories. And Hobbes says, one can't be picky. But we've observed before that maybe Stupendous Man actually has won some battles. It's just the bigger war that he doesn't really win. So I
Hmm.
want to just tally up some of the battles that he's had and whether they were a victory or not.
Okay.
So I don't think that he's ever won a battle against Mom Lady. She puts him to bed, she gets him to do her nefarious bidding of cleaning his room, all that stuff. I can't think of an instance where he comes off victorious against Mom Lady.
Yeah, I can't think of any either. She's a difficult foe.
Yeah. It's unclear whether he was successful in liberating the cookies from the pantry. I kind of suspect he did, though.
Yeah,
Um,
I would also suspect he did, because I think even mild-mannered Calvin has successfully liberated cookies from time to time. So
exactly.
yeah, I think Stupendous Man could pull that one off.
Yeah. He does manage to fry the school with the telescope lens, but Mom Lady, or possibly just Mom, still thwarts him in that his goal was to not do his homework, and he ends up still doing his homework, probably.
That's true. They do rebuild the school fairly quickly too, it
They,
turns out.
yeah, well, the nefarious counterpart to the Thermonuclear League of Liberty probably has lots of resources. So,
They probably did. That's why it's so important to stand up against them.
right. Now, Stupendous Man, I would say, does kind of defeat Babysitter Girl. We talked about that in the Roslyn episode. It's just that he pays for it later, again, at the hands of Mom, really. Uh,
Yeah, he does seem to be pretty successful in battling Babysitter Girl. He completes his whole plan and then changes back into his secret identity. So, yeah, I
right.
would agree with you.
Yeah. He also definitely vanquishes Annoying Girl. It's again from Mom that the comeuppance comes.
Hmm.
So, yep. And then the crab teacher is a little bit tougher. He gets away from her and manages to take Calvin's test, which he fails, by the way. But then, she drags him off to see the principal. So that one's maybe kind of a toss up, but you could
Yeah,
argue that he won.
he didn't completely lose.
Yeah,
There may have been some losing that occurred, but
right.
maybe not a total defeat.
But it is Mom who confiscates his costume. So, all told, I think Stupendous Man is actually able to vanquish all of his foes except Mom Lady. Babysitter Girl and the Crab Teacher are a little bit tougher to really say that he beat them, but he at least accomplishes his objective before they dole out whatever comeuppance. So, it's kind of a win for him on those, but ultimately, Mom cements the victory against Stupendous Man every time. So Mom Lady is the one you really don't want to mess with.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like before you said this, I might have been agreeing with Hobbes, like, oh well, has Stupendous Man ever won a battle? And the implication being it doesn't seem so. But yeah, you make a good case that except with the villainous mom lady, who's just too powerful with her psycho beam, yeah, I think Stupendous Man actually has won several times.
Yeah. So, he is a valiant hero. It's just Mom Lady is just too much for him. So,
Yeah, that's how it goes, it turns out.
yeah, maybe there's a lesson in that. All right, so that's all the Stupendous Man. Listeners, if you have a favorite, let us know, or anything else you'd like to tell us. We always love hearing from you. You can reach us at magiccandh@proton.me. So that's MAGICCANDH at proton.me. And there's a link in the show notes if that's too much to remember.
And as always, this is a completely free podcast and a completely ad-free podcast. So we would just love for as many people as possible to just come along with us and enjoy this amazing strip.
Yes, please come along. Let's go exploring. You've been listening to The Magic of Calvin and Hobbes, a fan celebration. We'll be releasing 40 episodes all throughout the year, from November 18th, 2025 to November 18th, 2026, to celebrate the 40th anniversary. Our intro and outro music is Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, referenced in the Calvin and Hobbes strip published on October 8, 1986. This rendition was performed by the Skidmore College Orchestra and made available under a Creative Commons license on museopen.com. We hope you'll join us next episode for more fun.